Welcome to the Mike and JD Show YouTube channel. Thank you for being here. I want you to do me a big favor before you check out this clip. I want you to hit the like button. I want you to throw in a comment and make sure you're a subscriber to this channel. And then I want you to share this video with your friends. Help us defeat the algorithm. And then if you like this content and you appreciate this content, please head over to patreon.com/the Mike and JD Show and support the show. That is how we actually get funded to be able to do this. So we thank you very much for being here. And now enjoy the clip.
This podcast is a member of the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Visit voicesofwrestling.com to hear the rest of our great podcasts, as well as show reviews, columns, opinions, and updates across the world of wrestling.
Competition starting to get thick, it's the click, so I hope you watch your A game. A made no rain from the track when we unite and spit. This is an A game, better bring your A game. Competition starting to get thick, it's the click, so I hope you watch your A game. A made no rain from the track.
Hey now, it's the Mike and JD Show, and I'm your host, Mike Gilbert, and I'm joined as always by JD by Gotta Leave It. How you doing, JD?
Black Scorpion, God, it's a 33-year-old storyline, but I think it's like the ultimate of what could have been in WCW. And there's a reason I like talking about the Scorpion, because like if you follow WWE right now, the big controversy from the spring, I should say, was Cody Rhodes should have been the champion by now, right? He should have beaten Roman Reigns. It was set up for that. And then Paul Heyman, of all people, came out and said, if Cody wins, the story is over. And a lot of people push back against that narrative. And to them, I say, when you have a hero, right? The hero journey is like the template of most modern Western storytelling. The hero has a goal, something stands in front of him. He has to overcome that, whatever thing could be. It could be force of nature. It could be a villain. It could be himself. It could be anything. Something is standing in front of the hero, and the hero has to conquer this mountain. And when the hero conquers the mountain, that is typically the end of a story, right? So oftentimes in pro wrestling, the story of the good guy is trying to get to the moment, right? And then oftentimes in wrestling history, when the hero gets there, what happens then? Right? Because like when you think about it, what was the grand story of Hulk Hogan winning the WWF World Championship the first time?
That was a little bit of a different thing because he had just gotten there and Iron Sheik had just won the title, but it was like defeating the Iranian villain.
But
right?
was it built up? No, it was Hulk Hogan. It was literally the week before Hulk Hogan is going to take Bob Backlund's place.
Yeah.
It was not about the journey. The story started when Hogan won the title, right? Bret Hart does not have, like, you can look at it as a career retrospective to get to that moment. Like, you can look at it from the 10 years it took, but in reality, in the story, he just beat Ric Flair.
Yeah.
And then the story started. Super randomly.
Yeah.
Flair was hurt.
In what was it, Saskatoon in like 1992?
Saskatoon, 92. Yeah,
weird. Yeah. God, man, I can't remember stuff from yesterday, but I can remember Saskatoon.
Yes, I will. I don't know where Saskatoon is. I'm sure like Paul or Preet could point it out on a map. I couldn't tell you where Saskatoon is. I'm from America. But I mean, like, I will always know of Saskatoon because that's where Bret Hart won the title. Right? I mean, like, very rarely does, in wrestling specifically, does the hero story continue, like, right? Because that's a different story, right? The holding of the title. And this is like, especially in WCW, which was a heel-based territory, right? The heel was the champion. Flair had always been the champ, and they wanted to put the belt on Sting. If you don't know the story, Flair and Sting are teammates, right, in '89, and then throughout the end of the year, and then the end of the year, Sting joins the Horsemen, Flair's babyface at this time, and then they tell Sting, who had won the Future Shock Starrcade '89 tournament to determine the number one contender, and Ole Anderson, who's also now the booker at this time, tells Sting he has to give it up. Sting says, no, I want a shot at Flair. I want to try to wrestle Flair for the belt. And they turn on Sting, and the Horsemen attack Sting. At the end of the show, they're the Thunder Cage setup. Sting jumps up to climb the cage, and he blows his patella tendon. So what was meant to be quick, because he was supposed to beat Flair at the next show, right? Which I think was Wrestle War 90. I think I forget.
Yeah, because did he blow his knee at Super Brawl or was
he
it
blew it on Clash? He blew it on the
Clash of the
Clash.
Champions. So
Yeah.
was it Super Brawl that he was going to win the title at? I'm trying to remember the timeline.
I don't think Super Brawl was a show yet. I don't think Super Brawl was a show till 91. I think it's either Capital Combat or Wrestle War. Instead he comes out with RoboCop.
Yeah.
Which is a story unto itself. We won't touch the RoboCop thing tonight.
Stay tuned for that one. That might be something we dive into later.
I would love to talk RoboCop. That is epic. But anyways, so they have to stretch out Sting's eventual winning, and they do this like kind of know nothing feud with Luger that actually does kind of draw a little bit of money and it's not bad. So then when Sting comes back, Bash 90, he beats Flair, and at this point it's 6 months. It wasn't supposed to be 6 months, but it's a 6 month. It's like a hero's journey story at this point for Sting, who was hot for WCW, to be the champ. And then they had no idea what to do. All they knew was they wanted to put Flair out to pasture because, quite frankly, Flair, like, Mike, what is the most epic rivalry in the original? And when you think of the original WCW, not the Bischoff era, the pre-Bischoff WCW, what is the series of matches that stands out the most to you?
Flair and Steamboat.
Absolutely. How'd it draw?
Not good.
Terrible.
Yeah.
They were WCW in 1989 is critically acclaimed, but not good. Like from the box office point of view, it's not good. Like George Scott, the original WWF, Vince McMahon WWF bookers brought in, and the dude doesn't have it anymore, right? Like they're not selling the Clash. Like they're selling house shows, but they're not telling people to watch the Clash. So the Clash show with Steamboat and Flair does terrible ratings because they're not pushing it on their TV. Like it's just the business had passed him by. They have a committee in the rest of 89, then only takes over in 1990. I guess in Between the Sheets about a year ago with Chris Elder and Dave Bixenspan at night. They wondered why Ole was put in charge of the book in 1990. That was the question we were trying to figure out. Why was Ole Anderson given the book? Because everybody hated his guts and nobody wanted to work with him. And Herd admittedly didn't like him. So we were trying to figure out why Ole is given the booking job in 1990. I pontificated that Herd set up Ole as a fall guy, right? He puts Ole in charge because he knows nobody likes him, and everybody, when it goes south, everybody will turn on Ole and not him because Herd didn't know anything about wrestling. And at this point, he's just trying to save his own job, right? And he has these ideas that are like, turning Flair into Spartacus and stuff like that. Like he just didn't really like Ric Flair all that much. So his thing was Sting. Like if you say what you want about Jim Herd, he's the guy who saw the value in Sting. And he's the guy who takes Sting from just being right. Because he gets that big moment in Clash 88, the first Clash, but they don't really push him after that.
And that's the thing. I think everybody says that's the moment where Sting became this megastar, and it really isn't. It really isn't. Yeah.
He loses. Not only does he in that year in 88, not only does he lose to Flair, then he goes on to lose to Luger not Luger. Yeah, no, it was Wyndham for the US title. Then he loses to Mike Rotunda for the TV title. And eventually he takes the TV title from Rotunda, but it takes a while. And he's over and but then they put him with Dusty Rhodes against the Road Warriors, and they try to turn the Road Warriors heel. Guess how that went?
Flop.
It's a huge flop. Cost Dusty his job.
Yeah. And so it's super puzzling, and it basically it's because WCW created this narrative whenever they made those Sting documentaries, and Tony Schiavone would say it on commentary. They would always reference that match as the match that made Sting, and it was great, don't get me wrong, but he actually had to rebuild himself up after that peak that he had. And I think it's because it was just Jim Herd saw a lot in him, but I think Flair saw a lot in Sting too.
Oh, no, for
and
sure.
Flair wanted to build back up Sting because Flair refused to drop the title to Luger, right? He said, no, I'm dropping it to Sting. And that's another reason why this whole thing drug out so long, because I think they wanted him to drop it to Luger.
They did.
He refused. And he said, no, I'm dropping it to Sting because I gave my word. Sting's going to be the one to take this company into the future.
So that's the whole thing is like, they'll tell you, the story says, oh, Sting was made that night. He went from being a random mid-carder to a guy, but I mean, it's not like they rocket strapped him. It takes 2 full years for Sting to be the guy, right? Hulk Hogan comes back. He has the world title in less than a month. Sting, when they decide to make him, is 2 years. Now, again, a lot of that too is because of the injury, but like Flair was a man of his word. He put Sting over. The problem with all this is when Sting wins the title, the worst thing to do is like to keep the feud with Flair going, because Flair, even though he's a heel in WCW, like nobody booed him ever. Nobody booed Flair, and it was hard. So they didn't really want to put Flair back in it at this point. Like the Horseman feud with Doom. Do you remember the Horseman Doom feud in the fall of 1990? Yes. Like it's like super racially tinged. Like there's some interviews.
Well, I mean that's Ole Anderson, right?
There you go.
The old Georgia territory. Like they literally hired a literal racist to run the company, and next thing you know, you got racism angles on your TV. That's what you get with Ole Anderson. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. They didn't really have anything for Sting to do after he won the title. I want to get into your Russell Joy article real quick, and I want to read some of this verbatim. Yes, so I'll set the table. So Anderson comes in to take over. Everybody's kind of puzzled with this, and so JD states, while Anderson was a hugely successful booker in the old Georgia territory, and we're talking about a decade prior to this, right? Yes. Georgia was on fire in like 1980, around that time frame.
81,
it had been 6 years since he led a promotion. The angle that defined his tenure atop WCW was a follow-up to the 2-year story that led to Sting finally dethroning Ric Flair for the NWA World Heavyweight title. It was supposed to be an intriguing mystery meant to help build the company's big babyface attraction. However, during the rise of Sting, a storyline on the internet said that itself was chock full of colossal mistakes. The company failed to build up the Stinger's first significant challenger. Instead, WCW struggled to figure out what to do with their top hero after dethroning Flair. It didn't help that the NWA WCW audience wasn't ready to let go of Flair as their top guy. Instead of lining up a series of short-term dragons for Sting to slay while trying to build up a potent threat to challenge Sting for the title at, say, Starrcade, WCW went in a different direction. Under Anderson, they created the mysterious Black Scorpion.
Oh, I thought you were going to hit play on the promo.
I am hitting play on the promo. It's not playing.
From the mysterious Black Scorpion, the man, the World Heavyweight Champion Sting, has signed to defend his championship against, live here on TBS on September 5th. Sting, do you know anything about this man? And if not, how are you preparing to wrestle him?
Well, I have no idea, Bob, who this guy is, the Black Scorpion.
Sting was such a bad promo back then.
No one's saying anything to me. I've seen this little bit right now.
I'll tell you, we can comment over this stuff.
You ever see when Sting tries to do the surfer accent? There was a time in '89 when they got Sting talking like Michelangelo.
He is an unknown. How do I prepare for something like that? Well, you just have to go for broke.
They never protected him. Never.
Anderson,
they never
any
protected
of the other stars in the NWA. At least I have an idea on how to prepare for something like that. But this guy here, Bob, the Black Scorpion, I have no idea who he is.
Yeah.
But I said on national
the
TV,
names he just listed off were
now that I would defend it against anybody.
I don't know, not worth. Yeah.
The dudes were just there that day.
They will get an idea who he is, Sting. And to do that, fans, let's watch this.
Yeah, let's watch it.
Sting, are you listening? Of course you are. You're too much of a hero and a champion to refuse to hear this tape. Sting, I'm going to destroy you. A long time has passed since you last saw me.
Listen to this.
Oh, yes, you know me. Or at least you do.
Oh, yes.
But don't try to track me down. It won't help. Even if you saw my face in light, you wouldn't recognize me. My face doesn't look the same. Curious? I imagine you are. Of course you are. I want you to be thinking, be concerned, maybe even a little scared.
Oh, I'm concerned.
Soon, I intend for you to be terrified.
There's nothing least scary than a guy telling you to be scared.
Yeah.
They would hate you enough.
The eerie music in the background. Did Jimmy Jacobs write this?
I'm convinced this is what Jimmy Jacobs was inspired by his entire career.
How about California?
Oh, how about California? California 86. Take note of that one. That's a clue.
Who I am, and remember this. You will have a chance to find out on September 5th at the Clash at Mountain Madness. I'll be there waiting.
Mountain Madness.
So that was the debut of the Black
Clash.
Scorpion.
Great Clash sub. I miss those clashes with the subtitles, like Chi-Town Rumble. Like those were always great. Mountain Madness was probably my favorite. So, okay. This was Ole's great idea. Rather than use somebody, by the way, I did all that. I should just let you read my own words. I'm like, oh, I just said that. Wait, I summed that up much clearer back then. So I'm an idiot.
Okay.
But anyways, so Ole's great idea was to create a new character rather than pushing somebody. So I want you to Ole gives hints. He goes, you know me, you know who I am. My face looks different. You wouldn't recognize me today. Do you remember California in '86? Okay, today I have to hear on every podcast, everybody says that pro wrestling is too inside, that the casual fan doesn't know what anyone is talking about. This is 33 fucking years ago. And fucking Ole, by the way, that is Ole Anderson doing the voice.
Yes.
Fucking Ole Anderson is talking about Power Team USA.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody watching WCW Saturday night not nobody. 10 people who watched WCW Saturday night in 1990 knew what Power Team USA was. Let me refresh this. Rick Bassman had this idea where he was going to find if one Hulk Hogan can work, 4 Hulk Hogans would be great. So he found 4 random ass bodybuilders, and we're going to turn them into professional wrestlers. I have this picture in the article of Bassman with 4 dudes. One of them is Sting. 2 of them you don't know about because they didn't make it past that promo picture, and the other one is a very large man with a kind of a mullety brown hair, right? Those 2, Sting and him, they go to Memphis, and I forget what they're known as in Memphis. I think it's just Power Team USA.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's still Power Team USA, right? And that dude is Jim Hellwig, right? Steve Borden, Jim Hellwig, that's the first team. They're in Memphis. They're baby faces. It is awful. I think I attached the video to the article. Terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's absolutely awful. You talk about Sting. This is Sting great at promos. You should see him in 1986, how bad Sting and Jim Hellwig are at promos. So they leave. They turn heels because they didn't have his baby faces. They turn heels in Memphis. And then Lawler kind of they had that relationship with Mid-South UWF, right? That thing with Watts. So when they're done in Memphis, they send them all down, and then Watts takes a look at these 2 roided up dudes, which, let's be honest, that's what they were. They were 2 roided up dudes, and said, hey, you know what the most successful duo of roided up dudes were? The Road Warriors. We'll make some knockoff Road Warriors and call them the Blade Runners.
Right, because Blade Runner was a pretty big movie at the time too. So.
It actually was not a pretty big movie.
It was not really.
No, it was actually a big failure at the box office.
Maybe it's like a cult
thing. Then. Yeah, okay. It got big after. So Ridley Scott had a bunch of failure releases. But it's again, same as Road Warriors. Took a title from an 80s movie that sounds really cool, The Road Warrior, Blade Runner, and then you have the Blade Runners, Sting and Rock. That's a heel tag team in the UWF. Rock leaves. Rock goes to World Class and rechristens himself the Dingo Warrior, who later, of course, would go to WWF as the Ultimate Warrior.
The Ultimate Warrior, yeah.
So again, most of your listeners probably know all that. So again, who the hell is he referencing, right? If you know this, if you are an insider fan, if you understand any of this, the only person that Ole Anderson could be talking about is the Ultimate Warrior.
Yeah, and this was in 1990 in the middle of the Ultimate Warrior's title run.
Correct. This is July or September of 1990, about 4 months after he's defeated Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania 4. Excuse me. But this is what's madness about all this. It's because, and there's WCW fans who thought, hey man, Warrior might leave and go to WCW, or maybe we'll get a champion versus champion match. Not anybody with the right mind, but I mean, because you could easily have done this angle and just be like, I'm someone from your past, you won't remember me, and it would have been whatever. But the fact that he clearly steers into Sting's real history is setting up is clearly just working the sheet readers. There's nothing else that it could have been, right?
Yeah, because nobody would have known about Power Team USA. Nobody knew that he was tag team partners with Jim Hellwig and all that stuff, and that he'd started with him. So yeah, he was definitely leaning in, hoping that Dave would cover it.
100%.
Yeah.
And hoping Dave would talk about it. Of course, Dave, I have not read any of Dave's coverage of this because I don't have to read Dave's coverage to tell you that he would said the Ultimate Warrior is not coming to WCW. The World Wrestling Federation champion is not coming to WCW to do a babyface versus babyface match.
Yeah, and if I were able to talk to Ole, I would say, Ole, maybe don't tease something you can't deliver on.
Isn't that like rule 101 for promotion?
Yeah, it's just bad form. I know he's just trying to get people talking, and get people interested in the product. But what you don't do is tease something that you have no chance of delivering on.
Right.
And there was no chance of delivering on it. Okay, a year later, there was a chance, right? Because
but
he lost the title in '91, and then he got fired, right? So
did Ole Anderson, coincidentally.
That is true, yeah.
So a little prophetic on both sides there. But that's what's crazy about this whole story. And then when the Scorpion does show up in Mountain Madness, he's a dude in a mask doing magic tricks. And when I say magic tricks, I mean like lame ass shit that you would see from a kid's like party magician, right? Like
Yeah, it's goofy shit. So the Black Scorpion was an unknown mystic who showed up in the promotion, and he immediately challenged Sting, as we just heard. The mystery of the Scorpion revolved around his identity. Unlike most masked man gimmicks, the Scorpion is only in the shadows, taunting the champ with clues and riddles to his identity. The challenge was made for the September 1990 Clash of Champions. Here, the Scorpion is just another masked man, and when Sting unmasks him mid-match, the champ is shocked to see the assailant wearing another mask. What the hell is this shit? And then rather than removing the next mask, Sting, who is always a stupid babyface, stands in awe as the second Scorpion shows up on the rampway. And rather than removing the next mask, for the next several months, Sting is tormented by the Scorpion, who performs rudimentary magic tricks while teasing Sting about the mystery of his identity. And eventually Sting and Scorpion face each other in the main event of Starrcade 1990. So we'll stop there. But yeah, he's just doing magic tricks. And didn't he There was this one scene because this lady just died recently. I can't think of her name. I should have actually looked it up. But there was a plant in the crowd who was a female wrestler who recently just died. I can't remember her name. And the Black Scorpion, did like a mind control thing over her and had her attack Sting in one of the poor segments.
This was unbelievable. The crazy part is, like I mentioned, I kind of downplay this a little bit. Sting has the match with him at Starrcade. Starrcade is in December. Yeah. This is in September, right? And they had another pay-per-view before that. Yeah. That's what's nuts about this. Yeah. So like at Halloween Havoc. And you remember who Sting wrestles at Halloween Havoc 1990?
Oh, God. Wyndham?
No. Kinda.
Yeah, it was because Wyndham came in as the fake Sting and got pinned by Sid Vicious, right?
Sid Vicious.
Yes. Okay, I remember now.
Because Sid is in the Horseman at this point, which is actually a good move. Like bringing Sid, I know we're a Wrestling Observer affiliated like kind of deal. The newsletter, I will go to my grave with this. The newsletter knock on Sid is wrong. Sid rules.
Yeah, it is. Sid ruled,
Sid did in fact rule the world. He was awesome. There was so much charisma and athleticism dripping off that guy. Like people are like, why do they push this guy? Because he's great. Yes, he's unreliable. Awesome.
Yeah.
Yes, he's unreliable. But yes, look at the man.
He loves softball. But I will say, yes, they were wrong about Sid. However, Dave Meltzer's nickname for him is Cycle Sid was pretty hilarious. Yeah.
It was 1990. And look at the man. Yeah. Just look at the man. So yeah, Sting and Sid have this match at 1990's Halloween Havoc. Great show, by the way. If anybody ever has a chance to go back and watch Halloween Havoc 90, in a year for WCW that is really kind of, it's a really good show. The Nasty Boys and the Steiners have this awesome match that's like kind of ahead of its time as far as just being like a wild, like hardcore style brawl. Like it's really good. Like it's
my favorite. It's my favorite Halloween Havoc, I think.
It's the best Halloween Havoc, quite frankly. Yeah. Like, it's really good shit. But so the end of that match is Barry Windham, who like is trademark long blonde hair, right? They have Barry Windham shave his head to look like Sting, to be a fake Sting, to take a dive so Sid can pin him. And even Jim Ross and Tony Schiavone and I believe it's Ross and Schiavone, are like, what the fuck is going on here? And then Sting comes out and pins, Sid, and they're all like, and the whole crowd is like, what the fuck? I mean, we just told you it was a really good show. Take that dumb fuck finish out of it. Like, well, it's a good match.
It was a good match, and I get what they were trying to do. It was a wacky finish. I didn't really particularly care for the finish, but I still liked the whole show. No. Yeah. But you got to remember that in 1990, I was 7. So stuff that you like when you're 7, you typically like when you're also 40.
I was 10. So, I mean, like, I'm in the same boat as you. Like, so that's the finish of Halloween Havoc. Then they go into Starrcade. You get the big thing, Sting versus the Black Scorpion. They have the Black Scorpion. Of course, when you think of scorpions and magic, of course, you would debut the Scorpion for his first match coming out of a spaceship.
Just classic stuff.
You can't make this shit up. And then the Black Scorpion finally comes out. You take one look at the Black Scorpion and you go, "Oh, that's Ric Flair." Like,
yeah, because he has the big nose.
He's got the nose. It's the nose. Like, there's just dude, you see, you just know Ric Flair, and he's trying not to work like Ric Flair in the match, but it's clearly Ric Flair. And then Sting unmasks him, and that's Flair. And I think Barry Windham's another masked Sting in that one, or masked Scorpion in that one too. And so they finally end this thing. And Sting wins. It's at Starrcade 90, and then Flair beats him a couple weeks later in a house show. And then they put an end to this thing. So, like, people will talk about, oh man, Sting couldn't draw. Sting was terrible to draw as champion. You draw with that. Who the hell would draw with that if that's the creative you're given? Right?
They shit the bed, not Sting, because everything Sting did, like the matches were always really good, and he was always crazy over with the crowd. Yeah. They just couldn't line up the opponents that he needed to be able to draw.
Even when they tried, even when they like actually put real effort in, like Jake Roberts, like on paper, a Jake Roberts Sting feud should have been great. It started off really good, and then did not end well at all. Like that's just the story. I mean, the only Sting doesn't have anyone to work with outside of Flair until Vader shows up, right? And that's not until 92.
Cactus. Yeah, he had some good stuff with Cactus.
He did have. It's true. He did have good, but Cactus wasn't supposed to be. Cactus was just supposed to be a monster for him to beat up. Like the Cactus thing almost worked on accident because Mick Foley was just so damn good. Like. So again, like the whole part of my article I wanted is, okay, we know that the Black Scorpion was a failure. We know for some reason, they wanted to tease us that it was going to be the Ultimate Warrior, which clearly it wasn't. Who should have been the Black Scorpion? So that's kind of what I thought. Yeah, I put 3 possible candidates in who I thought should be. So, I mean, like hearing about this whole thing, Mike, looking back on this, not taking my article into consideration, who would you have booked as the Black Scorpion?
The idea that I saw tossed around that I actually really liked, I don't know that it would have worked, but I would have liked to have seen them try it, would have been Eddie Gilbert.
That's the one I went with.
Because he was never really like, he did do a little bit of drawing. He drew a little bit in Memphis. He was a really good worker. He was kind of seen as a geek in WCW, but I think at this point he hadn't been around in a little bit, and he was friends with Sting. They had the UWF connection and all that stuff. And you could explain it away as him being from Sting's past. I think that I would have liked Eddie Gilbert. Would it have drawn? That I don't know, because it was Eddie Gilbert was never really seen as a top guy, but I think I still would have liked it.
So let's look at it this way. You got to take draw out of the equation because it didn't draw. Yeah, right. The Black Scorpion, if you tell me the Black Scorpion angle was meant to draw, I'll call you a liar. And even Ole Anderson says the Scorpion angle was done for TV, right? To do something on TV. So, I mean, I put because it was played by Al Perez and the Angel of Death. The Angel of Death was a WCCW, world-class mid-card guy. Yeah, he looked kind of like Nikita Koloff, wasn't great. So I pontificated him as one of them. I also said Luger. Luger could have been a Black Scorpion because him and Sting always had that frenemy thing going, right? They were both best friend and hated enemy, which is what happens in 91. A year later, when Cactus comes in 91, and they're doing the famous Jim Cornette come out of a boxer over. That's That's what they were doing. Medusa was leading out these essentially giant refrigerator boxes, and it was Abdullah the Butcher and Cactus Jack coming out to beat up Sting, right? And that was Luger that was setting that up. Luger was the guy behind that, and they do the Luger heel turn. So if you to push something like that up a year, right? Because again, makes sense on paper. Luger is the guy that has been unable to beat Flair since 1988. right? Luger is the guy who has to hold the fort down while Sting is injured. Luger has been the U.S. champion basically since 1987 at this point, right? Luger holds that U.S. title for 3 years, almost uninterrupted, right? But never gets that top belt. So on paper, it makes sense for your best friend to be super jealous of you, right? Because they won the Crockett Cup in '88 together. Like there's a relationship already. And again, they did it in '92. They basically did it again in '95 when Luger comes back. It would have worked if they'd have just pulled the trigger on it and made Luger, and he could just written off as he was lying, right? Because he's Sting's best friend, so he knew enough about Sting to fuck with him, right? So Luger could have been the Black Scorpion. What do you think of that?
I think I like it. But Luger was such kind of like a clean cut suits and all this and that. I just don't know if that would have been the right fit for him. Here's another thought. What about Dr. Death, Steve Williams? I know he was doing his Japan stuff at the time. Maybe he could have done something like that. Maybe that would have been cool because they did try to get behind him a little bit when he first came over after UWF was purchased. What do you think about Dr. Death?
I never thought about Dr. Death because he's kind of in and out. He's more concerned with All Japan in this era, but he does have a run with, like you said, like he's with the Varsity Club, right? In '88, '89, and he's
in
pushed
War Games.
He's in War. He's in the the original Tower of Doom, the original WCW Tower of Doom match. Ooh, that's bad. He's in that one. So I mean, you could have done Steve Williams because he had been back and forth as babyface, and Steve Williams never really got a main event shot in the U.S. So that could have worked. Yeah. The problem is the angle. Like you said, Flair, Luger wouldn't have worked because he was a clean cut guy with all the suits. Yeah, so was Flair, and he was the Scorpion.
Right, and that wouldn't have worked. I just felt like you didn't. If you're gonna turn Luger and push him against Sting, you wouldn't have needed to do the Black Scorpion thing. And of course they should have done it with Flair. I think Eddie Gilbert would have been a good choice. But if they were trying to elevate somebody like an Eddie Gilbert, a guy who hasn't had a shot, that had been a little bit of a veteran, that had a history with Sting, you would start looking at some of the guys from the UWF that happened to be either in the company or available at the time. Eddie Gilbert, obviously one of them. Dr. Death would have been another one. And then you start Rick Steiner was going to be my next guy. The problem with that is you break up probably the hottest tag team act that they had in the company.
In wrestling, basically.
Yeah.
Especially since the Road Warriors had left for WWF and the Steiners had really kind of taken their mantle as the tag team. Right, because the Steiners, if you haven't had a chance to see 1990, 1991 Steiner Brothers matches, they're awesome. Like
my favorite tag team of all time.
Mine too.
Yeah.
Like there's not even a close second. Like they're doing stuff that's just off the charts. In reality, they're just beating the ever living shit out of people. But it looks really great on television. The only guy it could have been is Gilbert. And here's the thing: Eddie Gilbert was booking the UWF at the end of its existence, right? Eddie Gilbert is literally the final booker of the UWF. And even during the purchase, he's running the TV. Jim Crockett Productions really has no interest in having the UWF run as a second promotion. They just wanted the TV time slots. So almost immediately that thing gets shit on. And Eddie Gilbert really isn't happy with that. So he actually goes off after that and actually starts booking the old CWA or Continental Championship Wrestling territory, renames it the Continental Wrestling Federation. It kind of becomes like the toast indie of like the newsletter set for a long time. It never quite works out, and then he winds up back in WCW in 1989. And he was actually the point, like when Flair and Wyndham, he's feuding with Flair, right, in early '89. Him and Wyndham, he is a mystery tag team partner for a match with Flair and Wyndham, and it's Steamboat. Like he was actually the catalyst of Steamboat storyline, Steamboat's return to WCW, and he's there, and there's a big heel turn planned for Eddie Gilbert because he's a babyface. There's a big heel turn planned for Eddie Gilbert at Great American Bash '89, but Flair is the booker in '89, right? He's leading the committee, and Flair and Gilbert don't like each other, so Flair kind of like poo-poos it, and it never happens. So then Gilbert's gone from WCW kind of after that, and then he was not in the company in 1990. And this is why I'll argue it should have been Eddie Gilbert, because I believe he's back in Memphis at this time. if you can get hot stuff Eddie Gilbert back in, and if people can kind of swallow egos and realize what it is, the only person it could logically have been in storyline is Eddie Gilbert, because Eddie Gilbert is Sting's first manager. Sting and Ultimate Warrior at the time were part of Hot Stuff International. Eddie Gilbert was their manager from the time they debut. Eddie Gilbert is the guy, right? And this is as a heel. They start as heels, then they turn babyface when the UWF buyout happens and they come into Crockett proper, right? And then Sting and Gilbert aren't really super aligned with each other anymore, but that in itself is the basis of a storyline, right?
And they have the video footage to be able to help tell that story, to do the backstory on it. Yeah.
Exactly. Like, who else would have known all that stuff about Sting and would have been able to manipulate it? Eddie Gilbert, who is a guy who did magic tricks. Eddie Gilbert was a huge Jerry Lawler fan and threw fireballs, right? Eddie Gilbert is the only person that it could have. Now, was right. Would it have drawn? Probably not. But you have a chance to actually tell a story about the term jilted lover comes to mind, but he's not really lovers. Like, it's a jilted mentor, right? Yeah. Because you see this, you hear this story a lot where you mentor somebody along, is like you see something in them and then they get really good and they wind up surpassing you. And the Eddie Gilbert character could have easily have been like miffed because this guy that he took a shot on, that he saw the potential in before anybody else, brought this guy, mentored him along, and then he goes off and becomes the world champion. What happens to Eddie Gilbert, right? It'd been very, very easy. And this is what's great, is you could use the Scorpion to launch that story. And then it could have become something completely different. And I think that's the biggest missed opportunity of the Black Scorpion, is it became all about the Scorpion. It became all about the mask and the magic and all that stuff. When what it should have been is it should have been a launching point to something else. Because that storyline could have, because again, it's always when the champion, when the overcoming babyface, when the guy who has to climb up the mountain reaches there, what else is there? There has to be another mountain for him to climb. And they never gave Sting that mountain. Like, again, the Scorpion's supposed to be it, but it's nothing, and it's not meant to be anything. Like, all he says, I made it up and didn't have any ideas for it, really, which is a lie, because you're clearly telling a story. Like, you have ideas, but you don't have an endpoint. So that's a problem when writing. Especially writing wrestling or booking wrestling, you have to have an endpoint planned, and that endpoint should have been the next big thing. And that's where it should have gotten really personal, because you could have done a really cool storyline where Eddie Gilbert, who knows everything about Sting, is now trying to break him. Well, and do that.
And it could have been perfect. And the thing about Eddie Gilbert is he could promo his ass off. He could have been able to tell that story on the microphone. He would have carried Sting on the microphone. He would have definitely gotten a ton of heat because he was a very good heel. He was like, if you take a look at some of the old Memphis stuff that he did, he was awesome.
It was excellent. Eddie Gilbert was absolutely excellent. He admired Jerry Lawler, right? He was a student of the game, and he got pro wrestling. The problem with Eddie Gilbert is that, one, he had his issues, which again, it was early 90s. Yeah. A lot of guys had the same issues, but he wanted to be a booker, right? And in WCW, he was never going to get that spot because him and Flair didn't like each other, right? And he wasn't an Ole guy, so Ole was never going to give him that shot. So, I mean, he would really need to have had someone believe in him and to like really, hey, we're going to go all in with this. But the problem is like they didn't have that plan. They didn't have an out, really. They just figured they would do it and then they would go somewhere else with it. And what it really does is it really derails Sting. It really hurts the first year of Sting's reign as a champion. And like, again, I think a lot of that is like, oh, Sting couldn't draw, is based on this. Because like there's nothing for him to draw with. Like, what is tangible about this Black Scorpion? Why are we supposed to be interested? And again, this went on for 4 months.
It was bad TV for 4 months. Yeah, and that was the problem with it. You know, honestly, they should have never done this Black Scorpion. I think everybody can agree with that. They should have immediately did the Luger heel turn and then went straight to the building towards Luger and Sting, right? And doing that, because at the time, you know, they were that next generation. Like Flair was kind of the previous generation. They were ready for most people were not ready to let go of Flair.
No, nobody's ready. That's the problem. Yeah. It's not
you can still do a Flair, or you can still do a Sting and Luger feud while Flair has some other stuff to do off the side.
Well, that's the problem too, is like remember that when Luger does get his title, right? Bash 91, it's Luger and Wyndham in this quickly thrown together cage match. They don't even have the belt in that pay-per-view.
Yeah.
They didn't even have the belt. They had the old I think it was the Florida title with a plate over it. So they're trying to cover up like, this is our world title. Like, it's like, and the fans are just chanting, "We want Flair" the whole time. Like, you talk about a bunch of fans shitting out a whole, and by the way, the pay-per-view is god awful, atrocious, awful. It has the most boring chain match in the history. Like Punk and MJF like to brag about the greatest dog collar match or something like that. The worst chain match is Sting and Nikita Koloff. It's bloodless and boring, and it should have been good, and it was terrible, just terrible. So like, yeah. So they do this Luger heel turn, right? At Bash 91, and they start building the Sting Luger feud. Well, Luger freaking quits.
Yeah. It becomes
2 months into his reign. Well, yeah. And then he's like, yeah, I'm out. And then like they finally do the match at Super Brawl, and Luger's enormous, juiced out of his gourd at that point, and then he's gone. So you never like, you got the match, but you couldn't, because Luger had already had his contract dates. He never showed up. He wasn't on TV for like 2 months leading into this. So you never really had that true Sting Luger thing. That's why Sting's feuding with the Dangerous Alliance, because they couldn't get Luger on the show. Like, it's the ineptitude of WCW is just, and it's my favorite company ever. Like, that's just the worst part. It's like, I look back on WCW with like all these fond memories, and I'm like, look how awful this was. Like, constantly.
Yeah. The funny thing about Luger is he very publicly burned WCW to go to WWF. And then he, 3 years later, very publicly burns WWF to go right back to WCW.
With
he
a pay
burned
cut.
them both. Yeah, with a pay cut.
Massive pay cut.
Yeah, he burned them both, which I find hilarious. It's kind of like that one thing, you know, with the thing that they say is like, hey, don't ever get with a guy or a girl like that cheated, or don't ever get that's cheating on their husband, because they're going to do it to you, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Don't ever think that you're like, I forgot the cliche goes, but if you're with a girl who's cheating on her husband, there's a good chance she's going to cheat on you. Yeah, we both butchered that whole thing, but that's basically what Lex Luger was, right? And you know what's funny? When Luger comes back to WCW in '95, like the first 3 years of that return are really good from him.
Oh, awesome. Yeah.
Like, it's the work of his career.
97 Luger, tremendous.
Tremendous babyface. Late 95 Luger as a heel. Like, when him and Sting, I don't know if anybody's ever seen this, because late 90, like, people don't talk about the early Nitros. They talk about the NWO Nitros, but those like the best story of those early Nitros is the Sting Luger tag team, where Sting is a babyface and Luger's a piece of shit heel, and everybody's like Sting, why are you with this guy? And it's like, he's my best friend. He's like, yeah, he's a piece of shit, but he's my piece of shit. So, and it's like in there with Jimmy Hart, and it's just like Luger will be, yeah, babyface, and Sting will turn around and Luger like fake smacking a kid in the crowd or something like that. It's so great. Like, those two, like, it's so good. Like, those two had such unbelievable chemistry together. Like, which is again what makes the Sting Crow stuff work, because Luger turned his back on him, and Sting's like, I had your fucking back for a year, and some dork dresses like me, and you buy it. Fuck this place, you know. There's no more an understandable character than 1996 Sting that has just absolutely had it with this environment and this bullshit that he's put up with for 6 years. And he's like, you people, I'm out. I hate all you people. I'm gonna go sit in the rafters for a year
and still get paid. I love it.
Got paid well. Didn't have a tan though, so that hurt him.
I love it, man. Well, this was a lot of fun going down memory lane, talking some Black Scorpion. One of the worst angles in WCW history. I think we could do a lot of podcasts just based off of bad WCW angles, honestly.
I agree 100%. There's so, and they're more fun to talk about than because when WWE does bad stuff, it just kind of fizzles out. When WCW did bad stuff, it was like spectacularly bad.
Yeah.
And there's like potential. They committed, but there's like, I still maintain they could have done something with the Scorpion. Like, the 2 Undertaker thing was just terrible from the jump, and it never, I mean, like, I'll maintain the double Undertakers is worse than Black Scorpion.
Ooh, that's a hot take.
I will fight anyone.
I don't disagree with you, but the dual Undertaker did sell out the United Center.
I was one of those.
So
I was
couldn't have hated
there.
it that much.
Oh no, I did. I was 14 and jaded. Like I'm like, this is stupid. I was there for Brett and Owen in the cage. I was that.
Yeah.
I was a smark even back then. Like, yeah,
That's funny.
Oh, it's terrible, man. Look, like I mean, like I know that was the main event, but I will argue that it was Brett and Owen that did it because like nobody bought that. That Undertaker thing was it was awful, absolutely awful. They had Liam Neeson, Leslie Nielsen, excuse me.
Yeah,
if they had Liam Neeson, that would have been fucking awesome. No, they had, they had Leslie Nielsen from the Naked Gun, like doing a search for Undertaker in the arena. God, that was Jesus. Yeah, no, I'm gonna say that the two Undertakers was worse than the Black Scorpion.
But they also had Chuck Norris come out and do a spin kick on Jeff Jarrett. Wasn't that the same one?
No, that was when that was Undertaker Yokozuna. That was like the next
Survivor Series. That was Survivor Series 94.
Survivor Series. Yeah, that's where the Undertaker died. That was before. Okay, no, that was before. That was a year before. That's when Undertaker died. Remember?
And then the lasers he got resurrected through the coffin up to the heavens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about pro wrestling, folks.
This is. You guys are so spoiled today that like the pro wrestling you get, you don't, and like I hear people talk about dumb pro wrestling stuff. You don't even like. This is worse than the peak of the Fiend. This shit was way worse than that.
Yeah. It's really, really bad, but I love to talk about it. JD, this is a lot of fun. Thanks to everybody, and until next time, mahalo.